I woke up Thursday morning to find a construction crew dismantling the playground equipment at Cedar Hills Community Park, and nobody had told any of us parents a single thing about it. My name is Owen Jefferson, and I had lived in the Cedar Hills subdivision in Cary, North Carolina for 6 years. My wife Sarah and I had 2 kids, Emma, who was 7, and Lucas, who was 5, and that playground had been the center of their social universe since we moved here. Every afternoon after school, at least 20 kids from the neighborhood would gather there, swinging on the swing sets, climbing the jungle gym, going down the slides. Parents would chat on the benches while keeping an eye on their children. It was the heart of our community. But there I was, coffee mug in hand, staring out my kitchen window at 2 men with power tools taking apart the swing set frame. A small excavator sat nearby, ready to tear out the rubber safety surface beneath the equipment. I felt my stomach drop. "Sarah," I called out, "come look at this." My wife appeared at my shoulder, her hair still damp from her shower. She worked from home as a graphic designer, and her morning routine was usually sacred time before she logged on at 8:30. "What's going on?" That's what I'd like to know. I set down my mug and grabbed my phone, pulling up the Cedar Hills HOA app. No notifications, no emails. I checked my physical mailbox from yesterday. Nothing. They didn't send out any notice about this. Sarah frowned, pulling out her own phone. "Let me check the neighborhood Facebook group." While she scrolled, I threw on shoes and headed outside. The morning air was crisp for early October, and I could see my breath as I walked quickly down our street toward the park. 3 other neighbors were already standing at the fence that surrounded the playground area, all of them looking equally confused and upset. "Owen, do you know what this is about?" asked Marcus Chen, who lived 2 streets over. His daughter Amy was in Emma's class. "Not a clue. No notice. Nothing." "This is insane," said Jennifer Rodriguez, a single mom with twin boys. "My kids are going to be devastated. This playground is everything to them." The 4th person was Gary Walsh, a retired teacher who had lived in Cedar Hills since the subdivision was built 15 years ago. He looked furious. "I've seen the HOA pull some questionable moves over the years, but this takes the cake. You can't just remove community amenities without consulting the homeowners." I approached the fence and called out to one of the workers. "Excuse me, can you tell me who authorized this work?" The man, wearing a yellow hard hat and reflective vest, barely glanced up. "We just do what we're told, buddy. Got a work order from the HOA management company. You'll have to talk to them." "Which management company?" "Premier Property Solutions. That's all I know." I pulled out my phone and searched for their number. Premier Property Solutions managed HOA accounts all over the Raleigh area. I dialed and got put on hold immediately, some tinny music playing while a recorded voice assured me my call was important to them. By this time, more neighbors had gathered. I recognized Tasha Williams, David Park, Rachel Green, and at least 6 others, all of them demanding answers. Several had young children with them who looked confused about why the playground was being destroyed. Emma's friend Zoe started crying. "But that's my favorite swing," she sobbed to her mother. Finally, someone picked up my call. "Premier Property Solutions, this is Brittany speaking." "Hi, this is Owen Jefferson from Cedar Hills Subdivision. There's a crew here removing our playground equipment, and none of the residents received any notice about this. Can you tell me what's going on?" "Let me pull up your account." I heard typing. "Okay, Cedar Hills. Yes, the work order was submitted by your HOA board president, Patricia Dandridge. The equipment is being removed for safety reasons." "Safety reasons?" The playground passed inspection just 4 months ago. And regardless of the reason, aren't residents supposed to be notified and given a chance to vote on major decisions like this? Brittany's tone became more formal. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can only tell you what's in our system. The board president has the authority to handle urgent safety matters. You'll need to direct your questions to the HOA board." I hung up feeling even more frustrated. Patricia Dandridge. Of course. She'd been elected HOA president 2 years ago, running on a platform of maintaining property values and ensuring community standards. In practice, that had meant increasingly petty enforcement of rules, fines for trivial violations like leaving trash cans out an hour too long, and a general attitude that she knew what was best for everyone. Patricia was the quintessential middle-aged busybody, with her blonde bob always perfectly styled, her tennis outfits crisp and white, and her silver Mercedes always spotless. She lived in one of the larger houses on Magnolia Drive, and her children were grown and out of the house. In the 2 years since she had taken over as president, she had made it clear that she found young children to be noisy nuisances rather than valued members of the community. It was Patricia, I announced to the growing crowd. Several people groaned or rolled their eyes. Last month she tried to implement quiet hours starting at 7 p.m., Jennifer said. 7 p.m., when kids are still playing outside in the summer. She sent us a violation notice because Lucas left his bike on our front lawn, I added. Not even on the sidewalk or street. Our own lawn. Said it was visual clutter. Gary crossed his arms. We need to call an emergency meeting. The HOA bylaws are clear. Major expenditures and changes to common areas require a homeowner vote. Do you have a copy of the bylaws? I asked. I do. I'll email them to everyone. Gary was already pulling out his phone. In the meantime, we should document everything. Take photos, videos, get the names of the workers in the company. The next 2 hours were a flurry of activity. I called into work to let them know I'd be late. I was a project manager at a software company in Research Triangle Park, and fortunately, my boss was understanding when I explained the situation. Meanwhile, Sarah had mobilized the neighborhood Facebook group, and it had exploded with comments. People were outraged. By 10 a.m., we had 30 families who were ready to take action. Gary had forwarded the HOA bylaws to everyone, and it was right there in black and white. Article 7, Section 3 stated that any modification, removal, or addition of community amenities valued at more than $5,000 requires a noticed meeting and majority vote of homeowners in good standing. The playground equipment had cost $18,000 when it was installed 9 years ago. There was no way Patricia could claim she didn't need a vote. I drafted an email to the HOA board demanding an immediate explanation and cessation of the removal work. 29 other people CSC'd themselves on it. We sent it at 10:15. The response came back an hour later, and it was dismissive in a way that made my blood pressure spike. Dear homeowners, the playground equipment has been deemed unsafe by a certified inspector and must be removed immediately to prevent liability. The HOA board has both the authority and responsibility to act quickly in matters of safety. The decision is final. The area will be landscaped and converted to a meditation garden, which will benefit all residents. Regards, Patricia Dandridge, HOA Board President. Meditation garden? Sarah read over my shoulder. Nobody asked for a meditation garden. The kids need a playground. I called Gary immediately. Did you see her response? I did. It's complete nonsense. If there was a real safety issue, she would have posted warning signs and restricted access while seeking bids for repairs. You don't just demolish equipment that cost $20,000 to install without exploring options. And you certainly don't replace a children's playground with a meditation garden without asking the community. What do? We lawyer up, Gary said grimly. I know an attorney who specializes in HOA disputes. Let me make some calls. By noon, the playground equipment was completely gone. The swing sets, the jungle gym, the slides, even the spring riders shaped like animals, all of it loaded onto a flatbed truck and hauled away. The rubber safety surface had been torn up, leaving dirt and patches of dead grass. My kids got off the school bus that afternoon and were devastated. Dad, where did the playground go? Lucas asked, his lower lip trembling. Emma was angry rather than sad. Mrs. Dandridge did this, didn't she? She hates kids. I knelt down to their level. Listen, this isn't right, and we're fighting to fix it. But it's going to take some time. I need you both to be patient, okay? That evening, Gary organized a meeting at his house. His living room was packed with 30 families, everyone talking over each other, kids running around upstairs. The lawyer Gary had contacted, a sharp woman named Diane Morrison, stood at the front of the room with a briefcase. Okay, everyone, let me explain your options, Diane said, her voice cutting through the noise. The room quieted down. First, the good news. Based on the bylaws Gary provided, the HOA board clearly violated proper procedure. You have grounds for a lawsuit. The bad news is that HOA litigation can be expensive and time-consuming. How expensive? Asked Marcus. If we file a civil suit, you're looking at potentially $10,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, maybe more if it goes to trial. However, I can offer you a volume discount since you have 30 families. If everyone contributes equally, we're talking about maybe $600 per household to get started. People murmured, but I saw heads nodding. 600 was reasonable when we were talking about an $18,000 playground being destroyed without our input. What are our chances? Asked Jennifer. Honestly, very good. The bylaws are clear. Patricia Dandridge doesn't have unilateral authority to make this kind of decision. Even if there was a legitimate safety concern, she was required to notify homeowners and give you an opportunity to weigh in on the solution. The fact that she chose to replace a playground with something completely different without consulting anyone is going to look very bad to a judge. How long will this take? Asked Tasha. If we file tomorrow, we can request an emergency injunction to stop any further work on the site. That hearing would happen within a week or two. The full case might take several months to a year, depending on whether they want to settle or fight it. I raised my hand. What about the equipment that was already removed? Can we get it back? Diane grimaced. That's going to be harder. If they disposed of it, we'd be arguing for financial damages and replacement. But let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, the priority is stopping them from moving forward with this meditation garden plan and establishing your right to have a say in community decisions. We took a vote. All 30 families agreed to proceed with the lawsuit. We each wrote checks on the spot, and Diane promised to have paperwork filed with the Wake County Courthouse by noon the next day. I barely slept that night. Part of me was energized by the solidarity of my neighbors, by the fact that we were standing up against someone who had been pushing people around for 2 years. But another part of me was anxious about the conflict ahead. I had never sued anyone before. This was uncharted territory. Friday morning, Diane was as good as her word. She emailed me a copy of the complaint at 11:30. It was filed under a joint action with all 30 families listed as plaintiffs. The defendant was the Cedar Hills Homeowners Association, Inc., with Patricia Dandridge named individually as well. The complaint laid out our case clearly. Unauthorized removal of community amenities, violation of HOA bylaws, failure to provide notice, and breach of fiduciary duty. We were seeking injunctive relief to stop the meditation garden plan, financial damages for the cost of the destroyed equipment, and attorney fees. At 2 p.m., Patricia Dandridge sent out a mass email to all Cedar Hills residents. The tone was incredulous and condescending. It has come to my attention that certain residents have chosen to file a frivolous lawsuit rather than trust the judgment of your elected board. This is disappointing and divisive. The board stands by its decision. The old playground equipment was a liability. And frankly, this community has more than enough children making noise as it is. A meditation garden will provide a peaceful space for reflection and will benefit everyone, not just parents who can't control their offspring. Any residents who continue to pursue this misguided legal action may find themselves facing countersuits for harassment. Consider yourselves warned. Patricia Dandridge. Sarah read the email aloud at dinner and looked at me with wide eyes. Did she really just threaten everyone? And did she actually say there are too many children? She did, I said, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. She's digging herself deeper. Emma, who had been quietly eating her chicken nuggets, spoke up. I don't like Mrs. Dandridge. You don't have to like her, honey, but we're not going to be mean to her, okay? We're handling this the right way, through the courts. But the rest of the neighborhood wasn't feeling quite so diplomatic. The Facebook group exploded with outrage. Several people who hadn't been part of the original lawsuit contacted Diane over the weekend, asking to join. By Monday, we had 38 families signed on. The emergency injunction hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday, October 12th. In the meantime, Patricia apparently decided to accelerate her plans. On Tuesday morning, a landscaping crew showed up and began installing raised garden beds where the playground used to be. They planted ornamental grasses and installed a small fountain in the center. She's trying to create facts on the ground, Diane told me over the phone. She thinks if she completes the meditation garden before the hearing, the judge will be less likely to order everything torn out again. But it's actually going to work against her. This shows a pattern of ignoring proper procedure and bulldozing ahead regardless of community input. Thursday arrived, and 20 of us packed into the Wake County Courthouse. Diane had warned us that not everyone would fit in the courtroom, but she wanted the judge to see the level of community involvement. We wore business casual clothing and looked as respectable as possible. Patricia showed up with her own attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit named Richard Thorpe. Patricia wore pearls and a navy dress, her blonde hair sprayed into submission. She looked confident, almost smug. Judge Andrew Martinez presided over the hearing. He was a middle-aged Hispanic man with reading glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. He reviewed the filings, then looked up at both parties. "Counsel for the plaintiffs, make your case for an emergency injunction." Diane stood. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of procedural violation. The Cedar Hills HOA bylaws, which are a binding contract between the association and all homeowners, clearly require a noticed vote for any major changes to common areas. The playground equipment in question was a significant amenity valued at $18,000. The defendant board president unilaterally ordered its removal and replacement without any notice to homeowners, without any vote, and without any opportunity for input. Since the equipment was removed, the defendants have been rushing to complete the replacement project, which is a meditation garden that serves a completely different purpose. We're asking this court to halt any further work on the site pending resolution of the underlying dispute." Judge Martinez turned to Patricia's attorney. "Mr. Thorpe, your response?" Richard Thorpe stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, the board president was acting within her emergency powers. A safety inspection revealed that the playground equipment had deteriorated to a dangerous condition. Rust, loose bolts, cracking wood. The board had a duty to protect the association from liability. When it comes to imminent safety hazards, the board has discretion to act quickly." "Do you have this safety inspection report?" the judge asked. There was a pause. Thorpe shuffled some papers. "We're working on obtaining a copy from the inspector." "So you don't have it with you today?" "Not at this time, Your Honor." Judge Martinez looked unimpressed. "Counsel for plaintiffs, do you have any evidence regarding the condition of the playground equipment?" Diane pulled out a folder. "Yes, Your Honor. The playground equipment underwent a professional safety inspection on June 8th of this year, just 4 months ago. The inspector certified that all equipment met safety standards. I have the report here, along with photographs taken by residents the day before removal showing the equipment in good condition." She handed copies to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. Martinez reviewed them, his expression growing more skeptical. "Mr. Thorpe, if there was a genuine emergency safety situation that developed after this June inspection, why wasn't the area cordoned off with warning signs? Why weren't parents notified of the danger? And why was the response to completely remove and replace the equipment rather than repair it?" Thorpe seemed to be improvising. "The board determined that replacement was more cost-effective than repair, Your Honor." "The board, or Mrs. Dandridge acting alone?" "Mrs. Dandridge is the board president. She has authority to make executive decisions," Diane interjected. "Your Honor, I'd like to point out that according to HOA records, the board hasn't held a meeting in 3 months. There are supposed to be quarterly meetings with published minutes. Mrs. Dandridge has been acting unilaterally without even consulting the other board members." Judge Martinez turned his attention to Patricia, who was seated behind her attorney. "Mrs. Dandridge, can you confirm whether you consulted with other board members before ordering the playground removal?" Patricia stood up, and her attorney tried to gesture for her to sit back down, but she ignored him. "Your Honor, if I may address the court directly. I've been managing this HOA for 2 years, and I have done an excellent job maintaining property values. This playground was an eyesore and a liability. The parents in this community are completely irresponsible, letting their children run wild at all hours. I saw an opportunity to create something more appropriate for the entire community, and I took it. Sometimes leadership means making difficult decisions without catering to every person's opinion." The courtroom was silent for a moment. I glanced at Diane, who was trying not to smile. Patricia had just admitted everything we needed her to admit. Judge Martinez removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Dandridge, you just confessed to violating your own HOA's bylaws. This wasn't about safety. This was about your personal preference." Patricia's face flushed. "I don't appreciate the accusation, Your Honor. I have every right to shape this community according to my vision." Actually, you don't, the judge said firmly. You're an elected board president, not a dictator. Your authority is limited by the governing documents that all homeowners agreed to. And those documents require consultation and voting for major decisions. He put his glasses back on. I'm granting the emergency injunction. All work on the meditation garden stops immediately. The defendants are ordered to cease any further modifications to the site pending resolution of this case. Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to hold a properly noticed general meeting within 30 days where homeowners will vote on what happens with that space. Diane stood. Your Honor, what about the equipment that was already removed? That will be addressed in the full trial. For now, the status quo is preserved. Nothing gets added or removed from that site. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue further, but Richard Thorpe put a hand on her arm and whispered urgently. She sat down, her jaw clenched. We walked out of the courthouse feeling victorious. Other neighbors clapped me on the back, and Jennifer actually hugged Diane. That was beautiful, Marcus said, grinning. Did you see her face when the judge called her out? She admitted everything, Gary said, shaking his head. Her lawyer must be furious. Over the next few days, the mood in the neighborhood was celebratory but cautious. We had won the injunction, but the real battle was still ahead. The HOA had to schedule a general meeting, and we needed to make sure we had the votes to restore the playground. Patricia sent out the meeting notice exactly 30 days out, the maximum time allowed by the judge's order. The meeting was scheduled for November 11th at the Cedar Hills Clubhouse. She included a ballot with 3 options: restore the playground equipment, complete the meditation garden, or leave the area as natural green space. She's trying to split the vote, Sarah observed as we looked at the ballot together. If people who don't want the meditation garden are divided between playground and green space, she might still win. Then we need to campaign, I said. We need to make it clear that the playground is the right choice. The next month was intense. Our group of 38 families organized door-to-door outreach, talking to every household in Cedar Hills about the importance of the playground. We made our case. It was a place for kids to play and families to gather. It encouraged outdoor activity and community building, and it had been a beloved feature that Patricia had destroyed without permission. We created a website showing photos of happy children playing on the old equipment. We shared data about childhood obesity and the importance of outdoor play. We emphasized that even homeowners without children benefited from strong community connections and higher property values driven by family-friendly amenities. Patricia ran her own campaign, naturally. She sent out glossy mailers talking about serenity and peaceful reflection. She argued that the meditation garden would appeal to a broader demographic, including older residents and young professionals without kids. She tried to frame the playground supporters as selfish parents who only cared about their own children. But she had made a crucial mistake by being so openly hostile to families. Her email about there being too many children had been screenshotted and shared widely. People who might have been neutral were turned off by her attitude. The night before the meeting, I was nervous. I had done everything I could to rally support, but I wouldn't know until the votes were counted whether it had been enough. Cedar Hills had 243 homes. We needed at least 122 votes to win. The meeting started at 7 p.m. The clubhouse was absolutely packed. Every chair was filled and people lined the walls. Patricia sat at a table at the front with the other board members, 2 men who looked deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. One was Derek Foster, a quiet accountant. The other was Tim Murphy, who worked in pharmaceutical sales. Neither of them had been particularly involved in the day-to-day operations of the HOA, leaving Patricia to run things. Patricia called the meeting to order, sounding annoyed that so many people had shown up. We're here to vote on the use of the former playground site. You all received ballots. Please fill them out and place them in the box. We'll count and announce the results. Wait, Gary stood up. Before we vote, shouldn't we have some discussion? This is supposed to be a deliberative process. Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but too many people were nodding in agreement. Fine, 5 minutes for each side. I didn't realize there were official sides, Gary said. This is supposed to be an open discussion. Then whoever wants to speak can speak, but keep it brief. I stood up, my heart pounding. Public speaking wasn't my favorite thing, but this mattered too much to stay silent. Hi everyone, I'm Owen Jefferson. I've lived here for 6 years. My kids, like a lot of your kids, grew up on that playground. It wasn't just equipment, it was where friendships formed, where kids learned to take turns and share and be brave enough to try the big slide. That playground was the heart of our community, and it was taken from us without our input. Now we have a chance to bring it back. A meditation garden is nice in theory, but is that really what Cedar Hills needs? We have plenty of quiet spaces. What we don't have anymore is a place for our children. I'm voting to restore the playground, and I hope you will too. Other people spoke. Jennifer talked about being a single mom and how the playground was a safe space where her boys could burn off energy while she chatted with other parents who understood her challenges. Marcus shared that his daughter Amy had learned to pump her legs on the swings at that playground, and he had video of it that was one of his most treasured memories. Then Patricia spoke. I understand emotions are high, but let's be practical. Playgrounds are expensive to maintain. They require regular inspections, repairs, liability insurance. A meditation garden is low maintenance and timeless. It doesn't cater to one narrow age group, and frankly, I think some of you need to accept that not everything in this community revolves around children. Some of us value peace and quiet. The room got very quiet after that. Patricia seemed to realize she had said something wrong, but it was too late to take it back. We voted. The ballot box was sealed, and Patricia, along with Derek and Tim, took it into a back room to count. The wait was agonizing. People made small talk, but everyone was tense. 30 minutes later, they emerged. Patricia's face was pale, her jaw tight. Tim carried a piece of paper. He cleared his throat. Total ballots cast, 219. For the meditation garden, 47 votes. For natural green space, 22 votes. For restoring the playground equipment, 150 votes. The room erupted in cheers. People hugged each other. Emma and Lucas, who had been waiting outside with some other kids, came running in when they heard the noise. Did we win, Dad? Emma asked. We won, kiddo. Patricia stood up abruptly and left the clubhouse without another word. Derek and Tim looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. After the celebration died down, Gary approached Derek and Tim. So what happens now? How do we move forward? Derek rubbed his face. Honestly, Patricia has been running everything. I don't even know what the process is for getting playground equipment ordered and installed. Maybe that's part of the problem, Diane said, appearing at my elbow. She had come to observe the meeting. Patricia was acting like an autocrat because you two let her. An HOA board is supposed to function as a team. Tim nodded. You're right. We've been completely hands-off, and that was a mistake. We'll do better. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Derek and Tim worked with a committee of volunteers, including me, Gary, Jennifer, and Marcus, to get quotes for new playground equipment. We discovered that the old equipment hadn't actually been destroyed. The removal company had taken it to a storage yard, assuming the HOA might want it back someday. However, it had been sitting outside for a month and had sustained some weather damage. We got quotes for refurbishing the old equipment versus buying new. The refurbishing would cost about $12,000. New equipment that was even better than the old setup would cost $32,000. We held another community meeting to discuss the options. This time, Patricia didn't show up. In fact, nobody had seen her around the neighborhood much at all since the vote. The consensus was to go with the new equipment. Yes, it was expensive, but this was an investment in the community. We would finance it through a special assessment of $135 per household, payable over 6 months. The vote passed easily. But we still had the lawsuit to resolve. Patricia's actions had cost the HOA money in legal fees, storage fees for the equipment, and now the cost of replacement. Diane advised that we push for a settlement where Patricia would be personally liable for some of those costs. In early December, Richard Thorpe reached out to Diane with a settlement offer. Patricia would resign from the HOA board, pay $10,000 toward the costs incurred by her actions, and agree not to run for the board again for at least 5 years. In exchange, we would drop the lawsuit against her personally, though the HOA itself would still be responsible for its legal fees. We took another vote among the 38 plaintiff families. It passed. We wanted Patricia gone more than we wanted to drag this out in court for months. Patricia signed the settlement agreement on December 18th. She resigned from the board that same day. Derek was elected interim president, and he promised a special election for the position in January. Meanwhile, the new playground equipment arrived in early January. It was spectacular. A huge jungle gym with multiple levels, tube slides, a rock-climbing wall, swings including adaptive swings for kids with disabilities, and a separate area for toddlers. The installation took a week, and the whole neighborhood turned out to watch the progress. On January 14th, we held a grand reopening ceremony. The weather was cold but sunny, and kids bundled up in winter coats ran screaming with joy toward the new equipment. I stood with Sarah, watching Emma race Lucas to the swings. "We did it," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "We did," I agreed. Gary came over holding a cup of hot chocolate from the refreshment table. "You know, I've been thinking. This whole situation was terrible, but it brought the community together in a way we've never been before. People are actually talking to each other, attending meetings, paying attention to how the HOA operates." He was right. The January board election had record turnout. Derek was elected president officially, and 2 new board members were voted in, both of them parents of young kids who were committed to transparency and following proper procedures. Patricia, for her part, kept a low profile. I saw her occasionally driving through the neighborhood, but she never stopped to chat with anyone. Rumors circulated that she was thinking of selling her house and moving. I didn't wish ill on her, but I hoped she had learned something from the experience. In March, something interesting happened. I got a call from a reporter at the Cary News who had heard about our story. She wanted to do a feature on community activism and HOA accountability. I agreed to be interviewed, and the story ran in April with the headline, "Cedar Hills Families Take on HOA and Win." The article struck a chord. I started getting emails from people in other neighborhoods who were dealing with similar issues with their HOAs. Gary and I, along with Jennifer and Marcus, actually started an informal consulting group to help other communities navigate HOA disputes. We called it the HOA Accountability Network. We helped a neighborhood in Durham fight an HOA that wanted to ban basketball hoops. We assisted a community in Chapel Hill that was dealing with a board that had embezzled maintenance fees. We provided guidance to families in Raleigh whose HOA was trying to prohibit holiday decorations. It wasn't a formal business or anything. We didn't charge money. We just shared what we had learned. Document everything, know your bylaws, build coalitions with your neighbors, and don't be afraid to stand up for what's right. By summer, the playground was the center of the neighborhood again. The new equipment was so good that kids from surrounding subdivisions would sometimes come over to play, which annoyed some people, but most of us didn't mind. It meant our kids had even more friends. One evening in late June, I was at the playground with Lucas and Emma when I noticed a moving truck at Patricia's house. I walked over out of curiosity and saw Patricia directing movers. She noticed me and froze for a moment, then walked over. "Owen," she said stiffly. "Patricia, moving out?" "Yes, I bought a condo in downtown Raleigh, something more suited to my lifestyle." She paused, and for a moment I thought she might apologize or acknowledge what had happened. Instead, she said, "I still think the meditation garden was a better idea." I almost laughed, but I managed to keep a straight face. "Well, the community disagreed. I hope your new place makes you happy." She nodded curtly and went back to supervising the movers. That was the last conversation I ever had with her. As the months passed, life in Cedar Hills returned to a comfortable rhythm. The playground was always busy. The HOA board was functional and transparent, and property values actually increased because families wanted to move into a neighborhood with such great amenities and an engaged community. In October, almost exactly a year after the playground had been removed, the neighborhood held an anniversary celebration. We had a potluck dinner at the clubhouse, and Derek gave a speech thanking everyone who had stood up and fought for the community. "A year ago, we faced a crisis," he said, "but we came together and we proved that when people unite around a common cause, they can make a real difference. This playground isn't just about the equipment, it's a symbol of what we can accomplish when we refuse to let one person's vision override the collective voice of the community." There was applause, and then the kids dragged us all outside to the playground for an impromptu game of tag that somehow involved half the adults too. I ended up being it and chased Emma around the jungle gym until I was completely out of breath. That night, after the kids were in bed, Sarah and I sat on our back deck looking at the stars. The temperature had dropped into the 50s, perfect fall weather. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Sarah said. "What's that?" "That Emma and Lucas got to see us fight for something that mattered. They learned that you don't just accept it when something unfair happens. You stand up, you organize, you take action through proper channels. That's an important lesson." She was right. Emma had been so inspired by the whole experience that she had run for student council at school and won. Lucas had started standing up to a bully in his kindergarten class, refusing to be pushed around. They had learned that they had power, that their voices mattered. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The shock of seeing the playground destroyed, the anger at Patricia's arrogance, the stress of organizing the lawsuit and the community campaign, the victory in court, and at the ballot box, the satisfaction of seeing the new playground installed. It had been exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. But more than anything, it had transformed Cedar Hills from a place where people just lived side by side into a real community, where neighbors knew each other, looked out for each other, and worked together. The HOA accountability network that we had started continued to grow. By the end of the year, we had helped more than a dozen communities across North Carolina deal with HOA issues. Gary set up a website with resources, templates for legal documents, and a forum where people could ask questions. We gave presentations at libraries and community centers about HOA rights and responsibilities. In February of the following year, a state representative contacted us. She was interested in proposing legislation that would reform HOA governance in North Carolina, adding more protections for homeowners and requirements for transparency. She wanted our input. We spent hours on the phone with her and her staff, sharing our experiences and suggestions. The resulting bill, which was introduced in March, included provisions requiring HOAs to post meeting minutes publicly, mandating homeowner votes for major expenditures, and creating an easier process for homeowners to challenge improper board actions. The bill faced opposition from property management companies and some HOA board members who didn't want their authority limited. But grassroots support was strong. People from all over the state who had dealt with tyrannical HOA boards reached out to their representatives. I testified before a state house committee in April. I told them about Patricia removing the playground, about the 30 families who had to file suit just to have their voices heard, about the waste of time and money that could have been avoided if proper procedures had been followed from the start. HOAs serve an important purpose, I said. They maintain common areas, enforce reasonable rules, and protect property values. But they are also private governments with significant power over people's homes and lives. That power needs checks and balances. Homeowners need protection from board members who forget that they're servants of the community, not rulers of it. The bill passed the House in May and the Senate in June. The governor signed it into law in July. It wouldn't take effect until the following year, but when it did, every HOA in North Carolina would have to comply with stronger governance standards. Gary called me the day the governor signed it. "We did something that's going to help thousands of people," he said, his voice full of emotion, "all because we refused to accept what happened to our playground." That summer, Cedar Hills held a second anniversary celebration. The playground was more popular than ever. We had added some shade structures and benches funded by voluntary donations from residents. Kids played from morning until dark every day of the summer. Emma was 9 now, getting more independent but still loving the playground. Lucas was 7 and had become something of a daredevil on the climbing equipment. Sarah and I still went to the playground with them several evenings a week, chatting with other parents while keeping an eye on the kids. One evening in August, a young couple approached me. They introduced themselves as potential buyers who were looking at a house in Cedar Hills. "We heard about what happened here," the woman said. "The playground, the lawsuit, everything. And honestly, that's part of why we want to move here. We have a 3-year-old, and we want to live in a community where people actually care about each other and stand up for what's right." That conversation stayed with me. Our fight hadn't just been about playground equipment. It had been about the kind of community we wanted to live in. And we had won in every way that mattered. Patricia never came back to Cedar Hills after she moved out. I heard through the grapevine that she had joined the condo association board at her new building and was already causing problems, trying to ban delivery trucks during business hours and proposing fines for people who left packages in the hallway for more than 30 minutes. Some people never learn. But that wasn't my problem anymore. My problem, if you could call it that, was convincing Emma and Lucas that it was time to go home for dinner when all they wanted to do was play outside with their friends. That was the kind of problem I was happy to have. 3 years after the initial playground removal, Cedar Hills was thriving. The lawsuit had been completely resolved, with the HOA's insurance covering most of the legal costs. The special assessment for the new playground had been paid off ahead of schedule. Property values in our subdivision were among the highest in Cary, partly because of the excellent amenities, but mostly because of the reputation for strong community involvement. Derek served 2 successful terms as HOA president before stepping down. His replacement was Jennifer Rodriguez, the single mom who had been one of the original 30 families in the lawsuit. She ran on a platform of continued transparency and community engagement, and she won by a landslide. Under Jennifer's leadership, the HOA started holding quarterly community events. We had movie nights where they set up a big screen in the park near the playground, food truck festivals, and holiday celebrations. The HOA newsletter, which under Patricia had been a dry list of rules violations, became an actual community publication with profiles of neighbors, updates on local events, and a kids section where Emma and other children contributed drawings and stories. The HOA accountability network that Gary and I had started grew beyond our wildest expectations. We incorporated it as a nonprofit in the 3rd year. We had volunteers in every county in North Carolina, and we had started getting inquiries from other states. We created educational materials, trained volunteer advocates, and even had a lawyer on retainer to provide free consultations to homeowners dealing with HOA issues. I cut back my hours at work to dedicate more time to the organization. Sarah's graphic design business had taken off, and she was earning enough that we could afford for me to go part-time. I found the work incredibly fulfilling. Every time we helped a community stand up to an abusive HOA board, every time we assisted homeowners in understanding their rights, I thought about that morning when I had looked out my window and seen the playground being destroyed. That moment had changed everything. It had transformed me from someone who just went along with things into someone who fought for what was right. It had turned a collection of houses into a real community. And it had sparked a movement that was helping people across the state. Emma was 12 now, in middle school, and she had inherited the activism bug. She was involved in student government, environmental clubs, and volunteer work. Lucas, at 10, was more interested in sports, but he had a strong sense of justice and stood up for kids who were being bullied. Sarah and I were proud of the people they were becoming. One Saturday morning in September, 5 years after the original incident, I was at the playground with Lucas. Emma considered herself too old for playgrounds now, though I occasionally still saw her there hanging out with friends. Lucas was playing basketball on the small court adjacent to the playground equipment when a man approached me. "Excuse me, are you Owen Jefferson?" I turned to see a middle-aged man in jeans and a polo shirt. "Yes, that's me." "I'm Robert Graves. I'm a producer for a documentary series about community activism. I've been following the work you've done with the HOA Accountability Network, and I'd love to talk to you about featuring your story." I was surprised. "A documentary? Really?" "Really. The episode would focus on how ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they come together. Your fight over the playground and everything that came after is a perfect example. Would you be interested?" I thought about it. Part of me was hesitant about the attention, but another part recognized that this could be an opportunity to reach even more people, to inspire other communities to stand up for themselves. "Let me talk to my family and the other folks involved. Can I get back to you?" "Of course." He handed me a business card. "Take your time." That evening, I discussed it with Sarah, Emma, and Lucas. Then I called Gary, Jennifer, Marcus, and the others who had been part of the original fight. Everyone was enthusiastic about participating. The documentary crew came to Cedar Hills in November. They interviewed dozens of residents, filmed the playground, captured footage of kids playing and families gathering. They interviewed Diane Morrison, who talked about the legal case. They even tracked down Derek Foster and Tim Murphy, who spoke candidly about how they had failed in their oversight responsibilities as board members and what they had learned. They tried to interview Patricia Dandridge, but she declined. However, they did get footage of the meditation garden she had partially installed, which had been removed after the vote. They showed the contrast between her vision of a quiet, adult-oriented space and the reality of the vibrant, noisy, joyful playground that the community had chosen instead. The documentary episode aired the following spring. It was part of a series called Power to the People that highlighted grassroots movements across the country. The Cedar Hills segment was titled The Playground Uprising. Watching it with my family in our living room was surreal. There we were on screen, our story told with professional production values, music, and dramatic reenactments of key moments. They interviewed Emma and Lucas, who talked about what the playground meant to them. They showed our legal victory, the community vote, the installation of the new equipment. The episode ended with current footage of the playground on a busy summer afternoon. Kids everywhere, parents chatting, everyone happy. The narrator said, "What started as one family's outrage over an injustice became a movement that changed laws and empowered communities across an entire state. The playground at Cedar Hills stands as a testament to what citizens can accomplish when they refuse to accept the unacceptable." The response to the documentary was overwhelming. The HOA Accountability Network's website crashed from traffic. We got thousands of emails from people sharing their own HOA horror stories and asking for help. News outlets contacted us for interviews. Other states reached out asking us to help them develop similar legislation. It was exciting and exhausting. We had to bring on more volunteers just to handle the inquiries. But it was worth it. We were making a real difference in people's lives. 6 months after the documentary aired, I got a phone call that brought everything full circle. It was Richard Thorpe, the attorney who had represented Patricia Dandridge during the lawsuit. "Mr. Jefferson, I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to reach out to you personally. I've been following your work with the HOA Accountability Network, and I'm impressed. I spent years representing HOA boards, and I've seen a lot of situations like what happened in Cedar Hills. Boards that forget they answer to the community, that abuse their power. I'm calling because I'd like to offer my services to your organization, pro bono. I know HOA law inside and out, and I think I can help." I was stunned. "You want to help us? You defended Patricia." "I know, and honestly, that case bothered me. She was clearly in the wrong, and I knew it, but she was my client. I've been thinking a lot about the kind of law I want to practice, and I'd rather be on the right side of these fights. So if you'll have me, I'd like to contribute." We accepted his offer. Richard became the general counsel for the HOA Accountability Network, and his expertise was invaluable. He helped us refine our educational materials, provided strategic advice on cases, and even testified before legislatures in other states that were considering HOA reform laws. 7 years after the playground was removed, Cedar Hills celebrated another milestone. The neighborhood had grown, with a new phase of houses built on adjacent land. The developer, recognizing Cedar Hills' reputation, had included 2 playgrounds in the new section, along with walking trails, a dog park, and a community garden. Jennifer Rodriguez, still serving as HOA president, oversaw the integration of the new residents into the community. She made sure they understood the history, the values, and the spirit that made Cedar Hills special. I walked through the neighborhood one evening that fall, taking in how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The original playground was still the heart of the community, now weathered by 7 years of constant use but maintained immaculately. Kids I didn't recognize played alongside kids I had watched grow up. New families chatted with established residents on the benches. I thought about the morning I had looked out my window and seen that construction crew. I had been angry and confused, with no idea that moment would reshape not just my neighborhood but my entire life's trajectory. The fight to save the playground had taught me that ordinary people have more power than they realize. All it takes is the willingness to stand up, the patience to do things the right way, and the courage to see it through. Emma was in high school now, talking about wanting to study political science or law in college. She wanted to fight for people's rights, she said, just like her dad had done. Lucas was in middle school and wanted to be an architect who designed public spaces that brought communities together. Sarah and I had been married 15 years now, and I loved her more than ever. She had supported me through all of this, from that first day when I was just an angry dad whose kids had lost their playground, through the stress of the lawsuit, the demands of building the advocacy network, the attention from the documentary. She had been my partner in every sense of the word. The HOA Accountability Network was now operating in 12 states. We had helped pass reform legislation in 5 of them. We had trained hundreds of volunteer advocates. We had resolved disputes in dozens of communities without litigation, simply by empowering residents with knowledge and helping them organize effectively. But it all came back to this playground in Cedar Hills, North Carolina. To Patricia Dandridge's arrogance and overreach. To 30 families who decided they had had enough. To a community that came together and fought for what mattered. I sat down on one of the benches, the same bench where I had sat 7 years ago with Gary, Jennifer, and Marcus, plotting our legal strategy. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, ran up to me. "Mister, can you push me on the swing?" "Sure thing," I said, standing up and following her to the swing set. As I pushed her, listening to her delighted squeals, I smiled. This was what we had fought for. Not just equipment, not just winning a legal case, but this. The sound of children playing, the strength of a community that knew its own power, the legacy of standing up for what was right. The playground at Cedar Hills would be here for decades to come, a testament to the idea that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they refuse to be silent. And every time a child climbed the jungle gym or went down the slide, they were part of that legacy, whether they knew it or not. That was enough. That was everything.